as things move forward, it's essential that we take the time to step back and reevaluate how things are being done. When it comes to education, I think we've been using the same old models for quite some time now. That's why it's worthwhile to reintroduce a new way of learning things, a new collective community-inspired way. This is a new way, this is a new idea. This is Paradigm Shift, Energy Exchange. All right, so welcome to Paradigm Shift Energy Exchange. This is officially the start of the show. So first topic of discussion, fractals, unfolding crystallization patterns. Jeff, what do you have to say about fractals?
They're everywhere.
And speak up as loud as we can.
Okay, but before I start talking, I speak in ideas more than I speak in just the words of what I'm saying. So
he is an idea.
I am an idea if you really want to look at it that way.
Is he really here? I don't know.
I have no idea. Okay, I'm speaking in ideas more than I am just speaking in the words of what I'm saying. So I'm talking about the concept more than the definitions or anything like that, because we're all going to interpret everything in our own way.
Yes.
Right? And the best way I can describe it is we're all talking about the same thing. It's that we're all painting the picture in a different way.
Mm-hmm. We're collective, but seen through our own perspective.
There you go.
There you go.
So
it rhymes, it must be
translating
true,
it in a more, I guess, rhythmic way. It's just what you do.
All right, so Jeff, based on
Ideas.
this image right here that everyone is looking at, explain that to the audience.
That there's always two paths, there's always a duality, and as much as they are the same thing in one point, okay, they also bridge in two different directions always, and each of those directions will always bridge again into two more directions, and two more directions, and two more directions. So in everything we see as a whole, there's always going to be a duality.
Yep.
So it's whether we see it as the whole in a vertical plane, or we're trying to look at each and every little tentacle that has been created, that duality all the way down to the end, as in our reach, as in our technology that allows us, okay, to better understand how we create within this reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions with what I say, just ask. And I'll,
Because it's
yes.
really complicated because it's so simple.
The sky isn't real, and that tree thing, all the branches extend in the sky, and it was like, oh, they're listening to the sky, and the sky isn't real. It's like.
All right, just to reiterate,
yeah.
reiterate what Jess was saying, since she's obviously not mic'd. So if anyone is asking questions, that's part of the process. I'll just reiterate. So as our audience member Jess was saying, apparently someone explained to her that the sky isn't real and the sky is just an extension of the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we call the trees,
That's kind of fun.
okay,
Cool.
well, let's look at it this
Fun,
way.
cool.
Let's call the tree branches like the thoughts of our brains, right? Every time the tree branches more, it's like every time we make a new thought in our mind.
It's like creating a new neural pathway.
Okay.
Right?
So the sky might not be there.
So Kevin, you can sort of jump in.
Well, think of the sky.
Jeff,
hang
but
on.
Kevin?
Think of the sky of the electricity. Think of the sky of the electricity of your thoughts. Okay, so instead of all of
Neurons
these
firing,
storms being
synaptic.
something like that are, let's say, a storm, it's actually the electricity within our brains in a collective instead.
Okay, so Kevin.
Yeah, if you go back to that image that you had up, you can look at it two different ways. That's the duality of looking at it in two different ways. If you flip that upside down, then it's one thing feeding into many. But if you look at a tree, what does a tree do? A tree expands into many branches for the single purpose of sustaining the tree. So
And me.
all these leaves are individualized.
And
They are
you.
all different colors. They are all different shapes. They're different
Now,
textures.
come through.
But they all feed into one. And so that idea is we are all individuals. We all do different things. We all have different purposes in our lives. But we do feed into one thing. And that's all of us. Because that root, that tree, is what sustains us all. So that's what fractal, that's the pattern that we're seeing, is this pattern in nature of showing separate but one at the same time. And that pattern is repeated throughout. And that's the lesson we need to learn from looking at images such as lightning and the tree.
All right, so
Yes,
Matt, based on this
The
picture.
duality
Yes.
feeding
So-
into itself.
Jeff, sorry, I'm just going to ask both, so I'll
I
just
love
cut
this
you off
picture.
when I
So many
need to.
thoughts all the time.
Yeah, I know,
Okay.
right? There's so many,
I see
like,
it.
except the fact that we're not going to be able to talk about everything
Yeah.
today. Right now, the objective is to be concise and to be
Concise.
coherent.
But there's still
You know?
questions. in the
Concise.
crowd
Yes,
sometimes.
there will always be questions, and there will
I
always
know.
be time to answer them.
Well,
so
I
for
see
the
it.
purpose of directing this, Matt, I want you to respond.
I'm asking.
Behind you, there's an image, as you can see, of a brain cell and the universe. Now, on a micro level, and on a macro level, we have the same patterns unfolding, this fractal pattern.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to that?
What I have to say, that's like as above, so below, you know? What's in here, well, like my internal projects to my external. So whatever makes up my inside, you know, like this, like my soul, I guess, projects onto this universe. I don't know, something like that. Seems so complicated because it's really so simple.
Well, I think it's kind of a reflection of everything's based on perspective, right?
Pretty
Like,
much.
one thing that I was kind of, actually, sorry, Gianni, can you just, is the audio up there cranked all the way? I'm just wondering, might as well just crank it up all the way. Just so those guys can. All right, so one thing that I kind of noticed the other day is that not, in the same way branches like fractal out, right? Our actions are also fractals. Think of the way of how an ant colony builds itself, right? Like the action of the ants creates a fractal pattern. So in the same way, when we walk out into the street on a day-to-day basis, we're creating like those fractal movements, those fractal choices in the same way. That's like kind of branching beyond the now. So
Yeah, it's like an idea of like each thought having its own frequency and like connecting with this universe. See, like the brain cell or whatever that is connecting with this universe. It's like the same. That's the same goddamn thing.
The next question. What
Another-
are your choices
And
in
as
the
I
right
said, as
direction?
above, so below.
And how do you know?
What do
Another
you
way
know?
to look at those images that you have is the holographic way. Instead of thinking of the hockey card holograph, you think of the actual scientific holograph. When broken into its individual pieces, reflects the whole still. And so what we're seeing at the brain cell is an individual piece that still reflects the whole of the universe. And so that to me, that's what that image is showing. That's the fractal nature is that we're seeing, is that we are holographic. We are a reflection of the whole.
within every
You are the
single,
world.
like this is kind of an idea that makes sense to me. Like, I think that every single atom is a black hole because that creates this idea of how the holographic universe would work. Because in that sense, if everything's a black hole, then black holes are non-locally connected to every single atom within the universe, right?
Exactly, and Nassim Haramehn's theory, which is that
Yeah.
exact thing,
Yeah.
is now getting credibility in the scientific community. His papers have been published and peer-reviewed. So, as has been said, a lot of the ancient knowledge that we've had is now being scientifically proven to the point that we're starting to learn or relearn things that we used to know,
Okay.
but in a totally different language.
So here we have just a
all
quick,
right here, all
It's like
along.
reflecting the duality of it.
yeah. So here we have just a quick diagram of what a hologram kind of is. Now, and this is kind of representing it similar to how a fractal is represented, in the same sense that no matter what scale you're on, each scale is a full reflection of the greater whole. So kind of Kevin was saying, so here's like, here's hockey cards, right? They're like kind of like what we would see on like the hockey card emblems and stuff. But even think about how you're seeing that, the way the light reflects on that, based on your perspective, like it reflects as a whole. Like it's a really trippy thing, because if you had all those stickers there, it would reflect off all of them. But if you only had half the squares, you'd get the same pattern in half the space, which is kind of a reflection of how light is bouncing off things in a holographic way. So in addition to, so here's some fractals. Does everyone's kind of heard of the term fractals, right?
You can look at
It's coming. John
Okay.
has
You
it.
have
Can
now.
I can
Kevin,
explain
go
that.
ahead.
A fractal is essentially, it's a repeating pattern that it repeats no matter what scale you're looking at. So if you take an idea of this picture, this pattern that you see in the large scale, if you go into the minute details, you'll see that exact same pattern repeated on the ends and phrase of the image.
another.
Reminds me of MC Escher.
Look at a spiral, and at the end of the spiral, okay, where it comes to the point where you can't tell it's a spiral anymore, if you zoom in all the way, that spiral can still go on. So it's just looking at it from the next perspective.
Yeah.
So the fractal, the next time you look at it, it's still a spiral on that next level, right? But you can't tell it is that spiral again from the next level. Yeah,
And to add,
Like nothing is outside of the realms
There's
of
a definition.
fractal.
Humans use a definition called recursion, okay, and some people will call it like life recursion. It's the same. It's the same picture with inside the same picture with inside the same picture with inside the same.
it's
picture
the mirror
with inside
held
same
up to
picture.
the mirror.
Yes,
Right?
the infinity
So,
mirror.
I
type
know-
thing.
No matter how far down more you look, you see atoms, and then every time you go and find out what an atom is, you realize it's a whole nother thing that's just basically what atoms was. It's a whole nother representation of itself inside. Same way as our planet, and then we go to a solar system, then we go to a galaxy, and then we go to... Exactly.
Yes. It's a way to understand.
But when does it loop back around in itself?
I'll also add
like
some
infinity is like infinity literally is an infinity loop, right? So
to add some credibility to the theory of fractals, If you look at most Hollywood movies, the graphics, the CGI that's used, use fractals because it makes it easier for the computer to understand the images. So the mountainscape that's being used to design Avatar, for example, is made up of billions of fractals.
Yeah, it's
Because it's
computer-generated.
simple to do, because you design one program or one code, and then you repeat that code.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Like the way how I see fractals, like the practical use behind them is because the universe is very practical. The universe is super resourceful, and it couldn't be what it is if it didn't follow the fractal pattern. But in addition to the fractal pattern, so actually, let's just look at one thing that just sort of jumps out at me. So this is the Mandelbrot set, or no, actually well, yeah, it's kind of the Mandelbrot. That's a Mandelbrot set, which is like a type of fractal. Now look at that, and then like you see that with like the well-known image of like the meditating like Buddha like monk person, right? Like it's kind of aligned in the same way. And also like it also like kind of like traces out the Ohm symbol, which is just kind of a interesting thing. So here you can see, you know, like the swirl that you see in your toilet bowl is the swirl that you see in the galaxy. Like
Another interesting way Another interesting way to perceive the fractals is if you look at a painting. A painting is a series of brush strokes. It's essentially the same brush stroke, but it's the number of times that it's applied that creates the image that we see.
yeah.
So
Or how hard you
a
push.
painting is just as fractal, but it's this complex image that comes out of it by basically the number of applications that it's used. And that's what the fractal is. It is the number of applications that's applied creates the image that we
Yeah.
see.
So this is what a fractal looks like when you put it into like a computer program, right? Like it's a lot more solid. It's harder to see this with your own eyes when you're out and walking on day-to-day life, right? Like because you don't usually see Mandelbrot sets, but you see the results of what it is like when you take like that brush stroke and you add more brush strokes on top of it. Like that's why we have like this huge variety of diversity within this reality, because it starts with that one pattern, but then you take that pattern and you add what is also very important is the Fibonacci sequence on top of that. So let's bring that up. Because
Fibonacci's
basically,
not the guy from Prison Break. Just so you know.
Yeah.
so basically, if you wanted to
a
try and
whole bunch
understand
more.
like how reality sort of structures itself in a sense, for me personally, this is just my way to suggest how to approach it.
Yeah.
Understand fractals, understand Fibonacci sequence, and understand the possibility that infinity is not something beyond your grasp. It's something that's
is where we
everywhere.
allow it to be.
Yeah, yeah. So imagine like the Mandelbrot set being a fractal, and then you add like the spiral to it. That plus the spiral gives like this huge diversity that we define as life.
numbers of the Fibonacci sequence?
Yep.
What are the
Because I think that's really key, is in the addition of how they work.
1, 9, 36, 84, 126, 1.
Because it's a really cool
Why does
comparison,
126 repeat?
just like what we talked about last night, of how people come together. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3.
3 plus 3 equals 6.
Well, no, it's just, it goes in the same sequence all the time,
And
right?
3 be 9.
And it's the whole of what it was before, and you're adding it within itself.
Exponential.
Well, it turns into something exponential eventually, right?
Oh, it is.
It's part of what we have to consider is with the fractals and the Fibonacci equations is we are each a brushstroke. We are an addition to the whole painting of eternity. Of
representation
the
of one.
existence. Yeah, exactly. We are one brushstroke. And it's where we apply our brushstroke that adds the value to the painting of the whole. So if we want to be down in the bottom corner that doesn't really add much definition, it's just a simple brushstroke, it's equally as important than the brushstroke that is the eye or the smile of Mona Lisa. So where we apply that is important, but where we end up on the grand scale of things is simply where we've been applied to.
It's like that brush stroke could be the difference between, and some people have heard this before, it's like 3.9999999 and 4. So is that a 4? As much as it resembles more of a 4 than it does a 3, we still call it a 3.